Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our special board meeting of the 1st of October 2024. I want to start us off in a good way by recognizing and acknowledging both the Esquimalt and Songhees nations on whose traditional territories we live, we learn, and we do our work. Trustees, may I ask for a mover and a seconder to approve our agenda? Thank you, Trustee Mabobi, and seconded by Trustee Gagnon. Any changes or amendments to the agenda? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of approval of this evening's agenda with a show of hands? That is unanimous. Thank you, trustees. Okay, so we have one item of correspondence, which is our next section. This is a letter from VC PAC to the board dated the 22nd of September 2024. It was added to our board pack up during our regular September board meeting, and here really for consistency and continuity. Anyone want to pull the letter at this point for discussion? Yeah, Trustee Kwan, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll pull the letter. I think, it's quite self-explanatory. I will pull it mostly to emphasize. I'm going to just read one excerpt that's emphasized in the letter, which says that VC PAC urges the school board to take the steps necessary to better understand and address the disparities that may exist between schools and within schools, particularly in dual stream priority schools, to ensure all students and families can expect equitable and inclusive learning environments, regardless of catchment or program of choice in which they, enroll.
Thank you, Trustee Kwan. Yeah, appreciate that. And appreciate that the letter is in the pack up for everybody. That is always helpful. Any other discussion of the letter at this point? I know we're going to pick up on some of these themes when we address our new business item. Okay. I'm not hearing any other, seeing any other hands, so I'm going to move us along. There's no chair's report tonight, and so that moves that we're moving on to D1. This is the Secretary Treasurer's report. Secretary Treasurer, will you move us through and explain to us what we need to do to consider the right-of-way under D1A?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Before you this evening is disposal, a right-of-way bylaw, which requires the board to approve moving forward with 3 readings of the bylaw to approve the disposal related to the SRW. This is an SRW that is related to the Caledonia redevelopment project, which is right beside Vic High. And you may recall that we did one fairly recently with BC Hydro and TELUS. So this is one for Fortis for the distribution of gas services for the housing project there. I'll just mention that SRWs are not subject to our disposal policy and regulation 7110. Or ministerial order. So we don't require ministerial approval for the disposal of an SRW. I've included in the agenda package a memo that has this information, including the motions and bylaws. Also in the agenda package, you'll see a terms of instrument that has some handwriting on it. This was handwriting from our legal counsel that we sent to Fortis to see if we could get this piece changed. They are not changing it. Their response was that the reference to land is in reference to the full lot, the entire lot Caledonia project is on, and that the SRW is further defined under 1A. And that is the portion of land shown in heavy black outline on plan, I don't have it right in front of me, EPP 140972. And so if you look in the agenda package on page 16, you will see what is called the Form C. And that is what is submitted to the land title office. So it refers in section 2 to the land, which includes the PID number and the legal description of the lot. And then attached to that are the terms of instrument, which refer to the specific plan for the statutory right of way. And then also attached is a copy of the explanatory plan, which includes the sketch plan of the lot showing exactly where the SRW will be located. And so I think I mentioned in the last meeting briefly that CRHC is eager to get this SRW approved. They have services lined up with Fortis for the installation on October 7th. And so this is before the board today for your review and consideration.
Thank you very much, Secretary Treasurer. Okay, I'm going to open the floor first to my colleagues if you have any questions about the materials in the pack-up. Trustee Gagnon, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. It's really more just a point or a question of clarification. We addressed the exact same parcel of land in an SRW in November of 2023 for BC Hydro and TELUS, and I'm just wondering why 11 months later we're doing this again as opposed to having them all at the same time, or who's, well, yeah, just the why for the timing is something I'm curious about. Thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Gagnon. Secretary Treasurer, go ahead when you're ready.
Not sure if I can speak to the timing of the project, but I know that the SRW would be granted to Fortis separately from BC Hydro and TELUS. My only guess is that they required access to those earlier services, and now that the development is, it looks like it's pretty close to completion, that they're going to need to have access to gas services for occupancy. That would be my best guess, but I haven't been following the exact timeline for this particular develop to know for sure.
Thank you very much. Any other questions in relation to the materials in the pack-up? So just clarifying, Secretary Treasurer, in the end, it is clear what aspect of the property they would need access to. It's not the entire property, isn't in fact the part of the property that's defined in the pack-up in black.
That is correct. It's not considered a blanket SRW on the entire lot. It's considered a concurrent one. So they've defined the space, they will do the survey, and when it's submitted to land title, the SRW will only be over the space that's in bold on that explanatory plan.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, trustees, do you have any other questions in relation to the materials? And if not, then what I'll do is I will read into the record the recommended motion, and then you can give me some direction. So I don't see any hands. Okay, so I'm going to read the recommended motion, the first one, that the Board of Education of School District number 61, Greater Victoria, approve granting a statutory right-of-way to Fortis BC Energy in respect of civil infrastructure associated with the distribution of gas by Fortis BC Energy and related works as such portion of the property shown in bold outline on the explanatory plan EPP 140972 on the Caledonia redevelopment property beside Victoria High School, legally described as PID 031-731-848, Lot A, Sections 50 and 53, Spring Ridge, Victoria City, District Plan EPP 88786. All right. Looking for some direction. Would someone like to move that motion? Thank you, Trustee Mabobi, seconded by Trustee Gagnon. Any discussion? Trustee McNally, I think you just had your hand up slightly before Trustee Kwan. So go ahead when you're ready, and then Trustee Kwan.
Yeah, I'll support this motion reluctantly because of the years and years of discussion we've had around, the whole Vic High issue, and I know solar power is being discussed in those discussions, but I just want to state that I'm reluctantly supporting this motion because I'm so very disappointed that the Ministry of Education doesn't provide us with the capital funds to go solar, at least partially. So those are my remarks.
Thank you, trustee McNally. And just a clarification, the gas, like the infrastructure will support the development, not the high school, but point taken. Trustee Kwan, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think we've seen some of these SRWs come before. And unlike trustee McNally, I won't be supporting this motion. I know there's still some controversy over the whole project, and so until I don't think it's in the best interest to support anything until that's resolved.
Thank you, trustee Kwan. Any further discussion in relation to the motion? I don't see any other hands, so maybe I'll just sort of pipe in my 2 cents at this point before we vote. From my perspective, I think while there are ongoing issues in relation to the land transactions and the deal, we also have a development that is pretty much at completion, and at this point, I'm not sure how we could meaningfully wind back the clock, so to speak. And I'm not sure what can be achieved by not allowing the infrastructure to go in, so that the project can be completed. So I will again reluctantly support the motion. Okay, anybody else have any comments or any discussion they want to offer prior to me calling the question? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor with the motion on the floor? And all those opposed? Okay, so we've got the balance of the board in favor with trustee Kwan opposed. Thank you, trustees. Okay, I'm going to move us along. We do have another recommended motion that the Board of Education of School District Number 61 Greater Victoria agreed to give all 3 readings of the Caledonia Gas Distribution Disposal Right-of-Way of Real Property Bylaw 25-01. Okay, so just a reminder, folks, from a procedural perspective, essentially when we're doing these kinds of statutory right-of-way, they are disposals, and so in order to do it all tonight, we would need the unanimous consent of the board to give all 3 readings. If the board does not unanimously agree to give all 3 readings, then essentially the 3rd reading or however many readings, 2nd or 3rd, would come back to the board at another meeting. Secretary Treasurer, is there anything else you wanted to add in relation to that?
I would just also add, given the timeliness of this, depending on how many readings we would get, we could consider doing a full vote as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so again, just a reminder, I'm looking for a mover to consider the recommended motion, which is to give all 3 readings tonight. To trustee Mabobi, thank you, and seconded by trustee Gagnon. Any discussion in relation to giving all 3 readings tonight? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor with a show of hands. All those opposed? Abstentions? Trustee Painter, would you just mind confirming your vote for me?
My apologies there, busy taking notes. I'm for.
Okay, so that's the balance of the board in favor and trustee Kwan opposed. So we will not be giving all 3 readings this evening. We can still give a 1st and 2nd reading. Again, I'm at your discretion and you looking for your direction. There is a recommended motion that the Board of Education of School District Number 61 Greater Victoria, Caledonia Gas Distribution Disposal Right-of-Way of Real Property Bylaw 25-01, being a bylaw to grant a statutory right-of-way to FortisBC Energy on such portion of the property shown in bold outline on the explanatory plan EPP 140972 on the Caledonia redevelopment property beside Victoria High School, legally described as PID 031-731-848, Lot A, Sections 50 and 53, Spring Ridge, Victoria City, District Plan EPP 88786 in respect of civil infrastructure associated with the distribution of gas by FortisBC Energy and related works be read a first time this first day of October 2024. Anybody wish to move that? Thank you, Trustee Gagnon, seconded by Trustee McNally. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor with a show of hands, please. All those opposed? And so that's the balance of the board in favor and Trustee Kwan opposed. Thank you, trustees. All right, so again, I'm going to start with our second reading and we'll see how far we get. The Board of Education of School District Number 61, Greater Victoria, Caledonia Gas Distribution Disposal Right-of-Way of Real Property Bylaw 25-01, being a bylaw to grant a statutory right-of-way to FortisBC Energy on such portion of the property shown in bold outline on explanatory plan EPP 140972 on the Caledonia redevelopment property beside Victoria High School, legally described as PID 031-731-848, Lot A, Sections 50 and 53, Spring Ridge, Victoria City, District Plan EPP 88786, in respect of civil infrastructure associated with the distribution of gas by FortisBC Energy and related works, read a second time this first day of October 2024. All right, may I have a mover? Thank you, Trustee Mabobi, and seconded by Trustee Gagnon. Any discussion? Again, this is in respect to the second reading. Okay, hearing none, all those in favor with a show of hands, and all those opposed. All right, thank you, trustees. So that's the balance of the board in favor and Trustee Kwan opposed. All right, thank you again, trustees. We will not be giving a third reading, and so I'm going to move us along in our agenda. We are now at question period. Question period, it provides for 15 minutes on each of our board agendas for folks to ask questions. Each individual can ask one question, and either I will respond on behalf of the board or I may direct the question to a member of our staff who might be better placed to answer the question. If we are not able to respond to the question this evening, and then the individual will be replied to via email with a response later on. Okay, so what do we have? I'm going to turn to our staff. I believe we had 3 questions from our last board meeting, if I'm correct in my recollection. Acting Associate Superintendent Powell, are you assisting with the questions this evening? And am I correct that it's the 3 from last time that we're looking at?
It is the 3 from last time, Chair. I did send those to you just now by email.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Okay. Just bear with me, folks. Okay, so our first question this evening is a question about moving to value-based pricing in school cash online. Could you please outline how the district met the requirements under Section 82 of the School Act, specifically with respect to 82 subsection 6, stating a board must publish a schedule of fees to be charged and deposits required, and must make the schedule available to students and to children registered under Section 13 and to the parents of those children and children before the beginning of the school year. Superintendent or possibly Secretary Treasurer, do we have a response to that question that we can provide this evening?
Chair, I can provide a response. So what I can respond is that the district meets the requirements of Section 82 of the School Act at the school level. And there are a variety of ways in which this is done, including summer mailouts to home, handouts to students to take home, newsletter, email to parents, posted on the school website, or using school cash online. And one thing I will just add is, given that this is the first year of implementation of value-based pricing, we have been receiving lots of questions from parents and schools alike, and We are creating an FAQ document for principals and vice principals to be able to share that information with parents and caregivers as needed. So it's still in progress, but we hope to have that completed and sent out shortly.
Thank you very much, Secretary Treasurer. Okay, folks, just bear with me. I'll look at question number 2. Okay, so question number 2 is, why has this board not listened to principals, administrators, counselors, teachers, students, and parents for the past year about our concerns over students and their safety after the board removed the police liaison officers? Well, the requester is certainly entitled to their view on that. What I would remind the individual is that there were various perspectives and views about that matter. It was after a multi-year review that the board reached its determination, and the individual partners around our table are empowered to speak on behalf of their members. And so I would just, remind everybody that although the issue can be quite polarizing, at the same time, I would ask that folks respect the representatives of each of our partners around our table and their right to express their members' position, if any, and respect the board's authority and our mandate to make these difficult decisions on important matters. Okay. Let me just look at question 3. Can the board elaborate on details regarding the worrisome online behavior reports, WOB, program with the monthly reports it is receiving? Superintendent, are you able to provide a response to that question?
Thank you, and through the chair, I will pass it to the Safe Schools Coordinator, Acting Associate Superintendent Powell for the response.
Thank you.
We receive WOB reports once a month. So those come from Safer Schools Together, and they are online reports or online posts that they've received that they have concerns about students that are currently in SD 61. Those are shared with me as a Safer Schools or Safe Schools Coordinator. And then what we do is I work with District Counselor Monique Moore, and we connect with the schools where those children attend. More often than not, thankfully, those students that have the concerning reports have a wraparound team already working with them and are well aware that there are concerns that they may be sharing online and in person. So that's essentially, I'm not sure if that was the question. They just wanted to know more in depth about what WOB reports are, but that's what they are in a nutshell.
Thank you very much, Acting Associate Superintendent Powell. Okay. I'm going to move us on in our agenda. Just bear with me. Okay, so we have a number of public disclosure of in-camera minutes. It's in the agenda for your information. And then one motion that is also in the agenda for your information. That the Board of Education School District number 61 Greater Victoria direct the superintendent to work with the board chair to respond to the 19th of August 2024 letter from Minister Singh, and further to send a written invitation to Victoria and Esquimalt Police, Oak Bay Police, Saanich Police, and the RCMP and their respective boards to meet with the Greater Victoria School District to discuss the safety plan and as outlined in the Ministerial Order M339. And again, that motion carried unanimously. We do have a number of items of new business under G1. The first is at G1A. This is the Equity and Inclusion Policies motion. I think what I'll do is first I'm going to read it into the record, and then I will suggest a way that we might be able to open the floor to discussion in a slightly more collaborative way. So bear with me while I read it. That the Board of Education of School District number 61 Greater Victoria direct the superintendent, 1, to propose amendments to policy 118 equity, policy 5147 inclusion of students with special needs, and any other relevant policy to ensure that each state's that the educational opportunities, student experiences, and student supports across schools and programs of choice will not be substantially different, as demonstrated by both key performance indicators and the direct experience of those within schools, including students, parents, teachers, and support staff. And 2, to establish a working committee prior to the end of November 2024 of rights holders and educational partners pursuant to policy 9210, the development of policy, with the mandate to review and make recommendations regarding the proposed amendments, which will be then forwarded to the Education Policy and Directions Committee on December 2nd, 2024. And 3, to report to the Working Committee and the Education Policy and Directions Committee on December 2nd, 2024 via a written report, which relevant data are currently tracked within the school district's systems and which data should be tracked with policy and or regulation changes by the Board of Education of School District number 61. And 4, to work with school district rights holders and educational partners to draft and bring forward amendments to the Equity Ad Hoc Committee terms of reference to ensure the successful implementation of School District number 61 policies as they relate to equity and inclusion. And further, that the board continues to advocate to the province for additional resources and supports to ensure the successful implementation of the equity and inclusion policies. Okay, so I think given the breadth and depth of this particular motion, I'm going to recommend to my colleagues that we consider moving into a committee of the whole, whereby we can have some more free-flowing conversation, both as trustees around the table, but also with our partners around the table this evening. And so that would be my suggestion, subject to my colleagues' direction, of course. Trustee McNally, go ahead.
Move that we go into committee of the whole for the discussion of this motion.
Thank you, Trustee McNally. Trustee Mbobi, are you seconding that? Okay, thank you very much. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor of moving us into a committee of the whole? And that is unanimous. Thank you, trustees. Okay. Okay, so this sort of allows us to relax our rules slightly and allows for some more free-flowing dialogue. It doesn't prevent us from having some longer conversation as and when we need to. And it also it allows us to invite our partners into that dialogue. So with that said, I'm looking for some direction on where we should start. So my suggestion again would be that perhaps we start at the first paragraph and we discuss each in turn. So if that suits everybody, I suggest that we discuss the first proposed amendments to policy 110, equity, policy 5147, inclusion, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to open the floor to some dialogue. Who would like to kick us off? Yeah, President Howe, go ahead. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for including me in the discussion. Yeah, it's a very large motion. So, and in the first paragraph, I suppose I have a couple of key questions. The first would be about exactly what's intended by substantially different. Because for teachers, of course, each teacher we consider has autonomy, and sometimes our programs are substantially different. So a grade 5 teacher in one school might be teaching in a quite different way or using different resources than a teacher in another school, or you know, that sort of holds true across the breadth of the curriculum and grade levels. So how would this concept of things not being substantially different impact individual teachers' autonomy to teach the curriculum in the way that they think is best suited to their own style, their student style? Yeah, that's my first question. Thanks.
Thank you very much, President Howe. Appreciate that. And again, if anybody wants to, yeah, Trustee Painter, I'm not sure if you had your hand up first or if President Hutchins had his hand up first. And does anybody, did anybody catch that? So
I'm
perhaps,
happy to defer.
thank you, Trustee Painter. I appreciate that. President Hutchins, go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the board through committee of the whole this evening. I've prepared a few speaking notes, which I hope get to the heart of kind of the line of questioning posed by Carolyn Howe. If the board will indulge me for a minute or two, interrupt me if I'm running along. This is my first time speaking to the board, so perhaps it'd be most appropriate if I began by first acknowledging that I'm a privileged white male and a settler on the traditional lands of the Algonquin-speaking peoples, now known as the Songhees and the Esquimalt First Nations. And while I'm the VCPAC and speaking on behalf of VCPAC this evening, I want to acknowledge certainly that VCPAC has more work to do to ensure that we're representing the voices of our parent community, and not just the parents and the families that have the privilege to enable them to participate in the parent advisory committees in each of their schools and with VCPAC. So as noted in the letter was heavily influenced not only by conversations with teachers and support staff, but by a significant survey that went out to about 500 families from across the district in June and July. And a resounding theme, this is getting at the heart of the question, from this initial engagement and certainly conversations we've heard from so many parents, is that there's significant disparities across schools. And so, for example, students and families are having a very different experience at George J than perhaps that they're having at Willows, not too far away. And then also within schools, there's a significant experience that are also happening. And I can speak from my own direct experience of a child in the English program at Quadra Elementary, that his experience in witnessing and being part of regular classroom evacuations, holding secures and watching disruption in his learning environment is a very different type of educational experience, a student experience than what might be happening in the classroom across the hallway in a different program of choice. And that kind of thread it's witnessed in recent Reddit threads. If you Google School District 61 on Reddit, you can see the same debate happening time again. And what you see in those forums, what we're hearing through parents in the neighborhood and certainly at the school is parents seeing programs of choice as a free form of private school, or parents of privilege knowing how to understand policy and procedure to ensure the best education experience for their own family, and understandably why they want to. Certainly within our neighborhood and talking to numerous families in our catchment, a common theme is when we think about student experiences, and the question from is, you know, why would you enroll your child in the English stream? Don't you know there's still space available in the program of choice? And so when we talk about educational experiences, talk about student outcomes, we have a system that's it's a legacy system. It's not unique to this district by any means, and it's not unique to this board that this board and probably the staff inherited as well. Is there's parents who have the opportunity, by their understanding of the system and their ability to participate, to opt out being a part of a certain school community by enrolling in a certain program of choice, by applying to change catchment. They in hopes of advancing their own child's individual experience. There's divisiveness that's created within the school system, within the school community, and within the own walls of a particular school system. So it's not necessarily about the curriculum that teachers are teaching. I think the teachers by and large are phenomenal, and certainly the survey that we sent out, it was a resounding applause for all teachers. Just so much support for the educational system in general that the school district offers and for teachers. But it's more about the educational experiences that students are experiencing. And I know I'm going long here, but just a couple more points. And so, well, obviously more funding and more EAs is certainly needed, and credit to the board for writing the letter to Premier Eby very recently advocating for more funding, and certainly part of the solution. That's only part of the challenge to addressing inequalities that we're witnessing. We have examples where a program of choice might go on a field trip where students in the other stream can't go on the field trip because the teachers in the non-program choice, in the English stream, to be blunt, are experiencing so many issues in the classroom that they can't possibly, entertain the idea of going on a field trip. And, certainly talking to principals and teachers, we understand at the VCPAC level that 80 to 90% of students with designation in process, IEPs, are in the English stream. And we're certainly hearing stories of 5-6 students of 18, 19 in the classroom with designations, but meanwhile in the program of choice, only 1 or 2. And so when we think about student experiences, when we think about teacher experiences, when we think about quality of education, 2 very different educational experiences within the same school walls, within the same building. And so this really exists, and it exists despite the realities of the certainly the very heavy budget challenges that the school board faces. But VCPAC really believes that both the policy of both the equity and the inclusion need to be taken together and looked at together can go a long way in advancing to the educational experiences of our children to ensure that both across schools and within schools, the educational experience can be the same. Certainly, VCPAC doesn't know of the silver bullet to creating more equitable and inclusive skills. Certainly more information, more data in partnership with the board, rights holders, key partners, teachers, support staff certainly would help. And start creating the space for meaningful conversation. But I think that when this really comes down to is there's legacy policies of the school district, all school districts. They've been in place for a long, long time. They create disparities across schools and within schools, and in particular across programs of choice. As students in the same walls don't know their peers in the other stream. It's 2 schools within one building. We see time and time again, and the experiences coming out of the same school can be vastly different. So thank you for hearing me out. I apologize for being long.
Thank you very much, President Hutchins. We appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to move to Trustee Painter with my thanks for your patience, and we'll continue from there.
Actually, I think Braden has done a great job of clarifying and provided me with I'll just pass. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Painter. Trustee Gagnon, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to ensure that President Howe felt like her question was answered, because we kind of just didn't answer it. We went into like President Hutchins. So I just wanted to make sure she felt heard.
We will come back. I think what I was hoping to do is do a round of like some discussion, and then we'll come back to some of the questions and other things that get raised through that discussion, but we will not lose track of President Howe's question. Thank you, Trustee Gagnon. Trustee Kwan, go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate all comments thus far, and both Presidents Howe and Hutchins. And I think you both raised some very good points. I guess for me, the question too is the name of the program of choice. And I understand, and I absolutely hear where you're coming from. I guess my question is really, so how do we still provide that opportunity for a language learned, and like a French immersion, which, we see across BC, and how do we provide for that? And maybe that's not to do with the motion here, and maybe that's something that needs to be explored as we go forward with some of the suggestions that are in the motion. But, I think it's just a question in the back of my mind of how you still provide those. I don't think we can answer it today, and I don't even know if we could answer it in a year, but how do you provide a French immersion kind of program, but address some of the things that President Hutchins has brought up today? So.
Thank you, Trustee Kwan. Yes, and perhaps we don't need to address like all of that perhaps if the board supports the establishment of a working group, then the working group can gather all the folks with a lot of expertise and experience, and to provide us with some recommendations. But yeah, I certainly understand the questions and the points being raised. Trustee Painter, again, sorry, folks. I'm not sure who had their hand up first. So, yeah, was you? Okay, go ahead.
Here.
Go ahead.
My off-the-cuff remarks. The first thing that comes to mind is that with respect to teacher autonomy, I didn't hear anything that suggests that teacher autonomy was being suggested as much as providing all the students in a classroom with effective access to the curriculum, which I think is the goal of every teacher we have in the district. So I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but that's what I heard. The second one is that my kids went through dual track schools, and yeah, this is 20 years ago, and we were having the same conversations about French immersion being recognized as the private school option, or an opportunity to escape from behavioral issues. So this is not a new one. One of the things to keep in mind is that resourcing is a big one, in that we frequently don't have access to educational assistance to support children with IEPs in French immersion settings, and often there is a level of encouragement to switch to the English track. This is my personal experience when students are requiring additional support. Which leads me to my last thought, which is the idea of disaggregated data. It's certainly a discussion point that's been going on at multiple different levels, including within the province. And I think this would be a good one to actually look at academic achievement and levels of support within the streams within multi-stream schools, to fully understand what the outcomes are for students. And it's not to point fingers, but simply there's an old adage, and I'll get it wrong, but what we can measure becomes important. When we can put numbers around things, when we quantify or value different things, they get a heightened level of awareness and consideration. I think this is an example of where we should be looking into this and really having a solid understanding of what's going on in our schools. Thank you.
Trustee Painter. President Hutchins, would you mind just bearing with me a second? Trustee McNally hasn't had an opportunity to speak yet, and then I'll come to you after that. Trustee McNally, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, in terms of there being a public school within, a private school within public schools, as both Trustee Painter and VCPAC President Hutchins has expressed, I've said this unpopular idea many times over, the course of my years on the board, but the Ministry of Education website itself says that their measures of achievement are the same, that students have equivalent fluency and ability in French, whether or not they start in early French immersion or they start in the grade 6 entry track. To my mind, that would solve a multitude of staffing problems and resource problems. And it would also, because it's a program of choice, it would include some student choice, which would be a novel idea. Thanks.
Thank you, Trustee McNally. President Hutchins, go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. I wanted to touch on Trustee Kwan's comment about what to do. My first reaction was to reflect on both your comments, Chair Duncan, and your comments, Trustee Painter, and I wanted to note that before jumping to solutions, because I think lots of different really smart people will come forward with lots of really great solutions that are worthy of debate. It's wonderful to have this opportunity during Committee of the Whole to talk through this more flexibly. But I would encourage the board to consider the motion as one motion, because I know, as Chair Duncan noted, there's an option for a working group, and as Chair Painter noted, there's the option for more data. and tracking and metrics and what gets measured gets done. And then there's another part of the motion that's amending the terms of reference. So for perhaps more frequent meetings of the equity committee to get on top of this issue and ensure that all of the dialogue and the conversation is had. But what I'm hearing is and seeing in the proposed motion is it's all of the different elements of the motion coming together to with a sense of urgency to drive the conversation about solutions to this problem and ensure all voices are heard in the process.
Thank you very much. Yeah, appreciate that. President Howe, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to say that I did have the answer to my question. I understand now more fully the problem that this motion is trying to get at. And I wanted to say that it's very exciting to have this conversation here because there's not a school teacher or an administrator or a staff member who doesn't know that this is a problem and really and how programs of choice provide opportunities, but they also they also create conundrums that we haven't been able to resolve. And I think it's a really big philosophical discussion. And I know that the board was very brave a few years ago and took a lot of heat for reducing our programs of choice in Greater Victoria. I teach at South Park. My school was one of the schools that became catchment school rather than a program of choice. And the union certainly supported that. And I was the vice president at the time, and it wasn't a very easy position to take when I was teaching at that school, but we did support that because we recognized that what that meant for the student population at South Park and what it meant for the student population at other inner city schools. So I think it is a really brave conversation to have and a larger one to have. So I also hear what you're saying, President Hutchins, that that you don't want to find the solutions now. I just want to make sure that when we pass a motion, we are kind of having some clarity in what the purpose of it is, you know, what those key performance indicators, that was my other question actually in the first part. What do you mean by that? And do you have a clear idea around what the key performance indicators are looking for, that you're looking for, or is that another thing that you want to resolve further on in the motion? But yeah, it's a big question. I'm sure you've done all your research, right? New Brunswick really backed away from French immersion briefly and then put it right back in because of the hue and cry that it caused. But it is definitely a conversation that we have a lot in the union, and we have it a lot with administration in schools because we know the inequity that programs of choice can create.
Thank you very much, President Howe. Appreciate that. And thank you for confirming that you do indeed have the answer to your question. President Hutchins, go ahead.
President Howe, certainly there's a whole host of metrics that are possible that are currently available within a typical school district's information system, and some that perhaps could be available with changes in policy or practice. I'll give an example that comes to mind. I referenced it in my earlier remarks. It would be the number of children in a classroom with an IEP, a designation in progress, or behavioral issues. Best practice in the literature would say no more than 3 in a classroom would be appropriate to ensure an optimal learning environment for all students. Yet certainly in inner city schools with programs of choice, VCPAC is well aware of English classes that will have 5 or 6, and on the French side, 1 or less than 1 in some instances. And so a really interesting metric would be for the betterment of not only the teachers, but for all students within the classes, would be to say, in an environment like that, is that a good data point to measure the success and the student experiences within those classrooms, how teachers are faring. You could then compare and contrast that to sick leave of teachers, for example, sick leave of support staff, extended leave of absences of support staff with higher ratios. And then you could look at policies that could be changed to balance the inequities between between classes in that school to create a more cohesive and complete student environment.
Thank you, President Hutchins. I think I missed the superintendent's hand. Sorry about that. I find it difficult sometimes with the tiny little panes I see. So thank you for flagging me down, and please feel free just to interrupt me if I miss you again, Superintendent.
Thank you, and appreciate this. As a superintendent, I do look forward to continuing our work in this area. I think we can all agree that this is important, and that equitable learning opportunities and resources provided to students in schools is paramount to the work that we do. So I do look forward to continuing the work we have started. We have an app called School Profiles, which I think can help assist in this work. I think there's a lot to consider in the motion, and I appreciate that we're looking at it as a whole. And I think that the working group or the working committee can come together to start to discuss which areas of data and which areas of focus we need to bring forward. And I think that it is an aggressive timeline. I'm putting that out there, that December 2nd ed policy is a quick turnaround. But I think if we begin this work in the next few weeks and can get to at least 3 meetings before that time frame, I think we'll have lots to add into a written report. So I did thank the motion and agree that there is work to do, and also don't want to get too far ahead in pulling solutions out this evening, because it is quite comprehensive, as you've mentioned, Chair Duncan.
Thank you very much, Superintendent. Yeah, perhaps we want to, oh, sorry, I don't want to preempt that discussion. Trustee Kwan, go ahead.
And this is just a small thing, but I think, you know, when we look at kind of the due date and when we want to bring some things back, you know, this is a really large topic, and as President Howe mentioned too, it can be very philosophical. So, you know, I see that as the beginning of the work that needs to be done. I don't see that as the end, and so, you know, this is really just a way to open up, and I would hope that you know, the work of whatever kind of working committee, or perhaps it becomes a subcommittee. I'm not sure how it evolves, but, you know, I would hope that work would continue regardless of who's around this table and how many years go by. So just a thought there.
Thank you, Trustee Kwan. Yeah, the practical side of myself wants to sort of say that perhaps we start to kind of hone in on what it is we think that a working committee should start to do in order to put together some recommendations and clarify things like key performance indicators and direct experiences, and what that means in the context of equity inclusion. And so, you know, perhaps we want to, although I appreciate the importance of looking at this as a whole, perhaps we want to consider how we might move some of the work forward in pieces, only because we might want to attach different timelines and different levels of priority to different aspects of the work. So what I'm starting to hear potentially around the table is that we understand the importance initially of a working committee's work to start to clarify you know, what it is we mean by key performance indicators and direct experiences and so on. What parts of the existing policy framework might need to be reconsidered in light of current needs and to address issues. And that a working committee, again, would provide an opportunity for subject matter experts and also partners to come around the table and have those more in-depth discussions. That said, the motion also provides for, again, the working committee to report out at education policy and directions in December. And I'm hearing from the superintendent that that is a, you know, a significant ask, but that it's not an impossible ask is what I'm hearing. And correct me if I'm wrong, Superintendent, depending on how quickly we could convene something like this and get everybody around the table. So yeah, just some thoughts about, from a pragmatic perspective, how we might push some of this work forward and prioritize certain aspects of the motion. President Howe, do you have any thoughts that you wanted to share? Go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, once you give me the floor, I'll just keep talking. I don't think the December 2nd time frame in point 2 is realistic to do really significant work. Just thinking from our perspective, the GVTA, we'd have to appoint someone to that people to that committee in 2 weeks. The committee would have to meet. They'd have to have several meetings. I mean, that's just a really challenging timeline for us to do thoughtful work. If that's the intent of point 2 in the motion, is that recommendations will be made by December 2nd, unless I'm misunderstanding something.
No, that is correct. Okay, so we're thinking about timelines and what is sort of feasible. Are we starting to come to perhaps a bit of consensus about the merit of having a working committee approach to this in terms of like the forum to have the subject matter experts and partners come together to have those in-depth discussions and make some recommendations? And so really, is it just a matter of like timelines? That's what I'm hearing anyway. Okay, so keep that in mind. I'm going to go to President Hutchins for a minute and then back to President Howe if there's a follow-up. No, okay. Okay, President Hutchins, go ahead when you're ready.
From VC PAC's point of view, thank you, Chair Duncan. I think VC PAC would first comment that passing what's in part 1 of the motion tonight would be most important. And that is the board codifying a policy statement that all policies will ensure that and state that educational opportunities, student experiences, and student supports across schools and programs of choice will not be substantially different, as demonstrated by both key performance indicators and direct experiences of those within schools, including students, parents, teachers, and support staff. In my mind, and I think VC PAC would certainly say, passing that tonight will then provide direction on how all of the subsequent policies that need to be amended. Certainly it gets more complex when you think about amending each policy, because it begs the question, should all those policies be separate policies? And so, for example, when I read the equity policy and when I read the inclusion policy, in many respects, they should be the same policy. And not stand apart from one another and work to bring the school community together. So certainly a whole bunch of work to do. And so perhaps to Trustee Kwan's points, certainly great to have an ambitious timeline for December 2nd, but perhaps the December 2nd timeline is not all the be all and end all answers, but rather a path forward to move on from there, recognizing that the policy statement has already been made by the board.
Thank you very much. My sense is that, and again, I'm looking again to have some discussion. My sense is that before we can really get to a policy statement, we really need to have the folks around the table at the working group, the working committee to, really unpack the issues, where the gaps are, and propose some solutions. And I don't know, like, to get to the point of broad sweeping statements without having that kind of recommendation and guidance from the subject matter experts at the working group might be difficult, but perhaps my colleagues have some other views, or again, our partners around the table. I'm certainly hearing from President Hutchins that it would be very important from a VC PAC perspective to have a strong statement akin to what is in part 1 of the motion tonight. I'm very keen to move some of the work forward to create a forum for that discussion to happen and for some of those recommendations and clarifications to come to fruition so that the board can then consider that in more detail. But Trustee Kwan, the floor is yours, and then Trustee McNally.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you make a very good point. I think I like a lot of what I'm hearing. I like everything that I'm hearing really tonight. I think it's a great, wholesome discussion. I do think that a working group is probably the best way to approach this, and I think that a lot of the discussions that is happening tonight could be even better in a working group setting to kind of determine what perhaps is needed. What are the first steps that, as President Hutchins suggested? Maybe it's looking at the policies and developing, one policy, amalgamating some, that kind of thing. Maybe one of the priorities is data. So, and I see all of that in here, but I also wonder if, I don't even know if we'll be able to, without, a full meeting discussion, be able to even determine that. And I'm not even sure if the people at the table here are, it is enough to actually have that conversation. So I think my point would be that, establishing a working group and actually determining what the priorities of that working group should be, that might be the first step. And maybe December 2nd is a great date still to bring some of those priorities back and back to the board to say, okay, these are the things we want to work on for the remainder of the school year, and some of the things beyond. So just some thoughts there. I don't know what the table here feels about that, but that could be a way to move forward.
Thank you, Trustee Kwan. Trustee McNally, you were next, and then President Winkler.
Thank you, Chair. Recognizing teachers' autonomy in instructional materials. This is a great motion. I mean, as a former teacher of many students with major challenges, I'm really glad to see this, but I'm just scared of the timeline. It's so big that I don't know, December 2nd scares me, but if it doesn't scare anybody else, I'll go with it. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you, Trustee McNally. And perhaps it's not that everything would be ready and all clear and every recommendation would be done, but to report to, it could be just that it's a status report, right? This is as far as we've gotten. This is what we think is outstanding, and we'll come back in February with the rest of it. I don't know. But certainly we could consider that in terms of drafting. President Winkler, thanks for your patience, and then Trustee Gagnon.
No problem. That sounds really weird to hear that. Sorry. I think I'm here with my other hat, if I can indulge the board, that I am the proud principal of George J, a school that was named and a stat was listed. And so I caution, or I hope as we move forward in this work, that it's not one data point that paints one story, and that we're looking at many different ways so we see the whole story. Because I think it's easy to see one that looks shocking and paints it as one thing, and yet it undermines or diminishes all the incredible work the teachers and staff are doing in our buildings. And we want to make sure we're capturing that and celebrating those pieces as we move forward and building upon, because there's a lot of things that have been done to build the equity in a building like George J or Quadra. And I don't want that to get lost in this conversation. So I want to make sure we can bring all those colleagues in so that we can use that expertise and build upon the work we've already started.
Thank you very much, President Winkler. Appreciate that. And appreciate that you bring two hats with you tonight. Thanks for sharing that. Trustee Gagnon, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I am wary of that timeline that seems to be rather condensed. I'm also wary that if we were to even pass part 1 tonight, it seems like it's putting the cart before the horse, because parts 2 through 4 seem to be, they need to be precedents to part 1 to really get the understanding, work with the educational partners, work with the rights holders, and come up with an actual tangible plan before we start putting policies into place or amending the policy before we even know if that's the right course of action. So that's a bit of a concern to me. And I also agree with what President Principal Winkler says about the singular data point. Without seeing the other data points along throughout SD 61, it's one spot. So it could be the high spot, and it is likely is high, but I don't know that. There's just no reference to alternative data points. So I would be more interested to learn those alternative data points before really making something right here and now tonight.
Okay. So I'm starting to hear that, again, perhaps we want to be looking at moving a motion which leans into the idea of a working committee and perhaps gives some direction about what that working committee should be focused on, with some timelines to sort of prioritize the work in a urgent but also realistic manner. Okay, so, but I did see some virtual hands up. I believe President Hutchins, you had your hand up, and let me know if I've missed anyone else.
Well, thank you, Chair Duncan. I just looking at the motion as a whole here, and you may be getting at about what I'm about to say, but as I read the motion as a whole, it is I think perhaps part one of that motion that provides the overall framework or the guideline to the work that needs to be done in 2, 3, and 4. And so perhaps with the intent of generally leaving that work intact, but without formally stating the policy. Perhaps the challenging word is in that first motion is that to ensure that each states, and it's that the formality of that word states, but rather objective number one in the proposed motion would rather be these are the overall objectives of the overall goal of the board, but please come back with the details. I think part one is really, and I've said that, but it provides a framework for all that follows in my read of what's on the agenda. And so having clear direction in part one, I think is critical for staff and key partners to be able to support the work.
Thank you, President Hutchins. Yeah, no, I entirely, understand and appreciate the importance of being clear on kind of why it is that we would task a working committee, like what is their overall goal? What are we trying to achieve overall? And wanting to make sure that that reason for being is clearly articulated so that we get back what it is that we're trying to address. I'm wondering if we can perhaps look to something whereby we're directing that a working committee be established with rights holders and educational partners pursuant to policy 9210. We say with a mandate to review and make recommendations regarding proposed amendments to policy 110, equity, policy 15147, inclusion and students with special needs. And then look at some more kind of qualifying statement, giving some of that kind of underpinning or clarity about what it is we're trying to have them do, besides what we articulate at 3, which is looking at the data and what data should be tracked, what is being tracked, what should be tracked. And besides looking at the ad hoc committee, the equity ad hoc committee terms of reference and providing recommendations. So might that be a way to approach it if we were to sort of turn our conversation now to a conversation about sort of how would we provide meaningful direction if in fact there is some consensus forming that really we'd be looking to develop to direct a working committee to come together by the end of November to do certain things for us. And again, happy to have dialogue. I don't want to move us out of committee of the whole until we've kind of got to the point where we're pretty close to having some recommended direction. I think with this particular subject matter, it's ever so important that we have this time to collaborate over how, what we're trying to achieve and how we go about it. Because everybody at the end of the day is going to have to feed in with their lens, perspective, and expertise. And so ideally, if we're on the same page in terms of how we achieve that, then all the better. So, perhaps can we start with the idea of establishing a working committee prior to the end of November 2024 of rights holders and educational partners pursuant to policy 9210, with a mandate to review and make recommendations regarding proposed amendments to policy 110, policy 5147, and to provide recommendations around what data is and should be tracked. Can we start there and then look further to some other, again, qualifying statements and direction for the working group, such as the ad hoc committee terms of reference and so on? And then maybe we could put some more like principled statements about, you know, what the goal would be of the committee, just to ground the work. Trustee McNally, go ahead.
Thank you. If you're making a motion, Chair, I would support it. And realizing that the excellent expected work in this complex motion will not be laid aside in any way and would continue to be front and center. But Chair, were you making an amendment?
Not yet.
It sounded really good.
I wasn't, because I didn't want to cut off dialogue, because I think once we are ready to move a motion, I'll ask us to move out of committee of the whole, and then we'll get into more formalized protocols and so on, which limits further engagement. And so ideally, if we can do a little creative crafting before we move out of committee of the whole, to allow for that dialogue to continue as needed, I think all the better. But thank you for some feedback about whether you think we're kind of getting close to that point. Trustee Painter, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. I think this has already swirled through the conversation, but rather than looking at creating a specific committee for this work, I think it might be more appropriate to focus on one of the existing ad hoc committees, like equity, for example. And there we've got an established group, hasn't been meeting up frequently, but it's people are known. So rather than adding another committee to everyone's plate, that might be the way to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. I think we have all of the, again, I guess turning to the superintendent with the equity ad hoc committee, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we have all of the kind of partners and rights holders around that table already. That's already baked into the terms of reference. However, is the existing terms of reference for the equity ad hoc committee broad enough to encompass the work that is envisioned by this motion?
Through the chair, I believe it is. When I connected with Associate Superintendent Arts, he said that the committee was looking for specific direction to complete their work this year. So they met toward the end of last year and they're ready to meet again in October. And I think they are looking for direction on what areas to focus in on.
Okay, no, that's good for us to know. Turning to our partners around the table this evening, just from your own perspective with your reps that you've assigned already to Equity Ad Hoc Committee, how would you feel about us potentially focusing on directing this work to occur at that table with your reps at the Equity Ad Hoc Committee table? Yeah, President Howe, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that would be appropriate for our reps.
Thank you. President Winkler or President Hutchins, do you have any views in respect to that approach? So focusing the work on Equity Ad Hoc Committee?
No, it seems okay. Sorry.
So go ahead.
I would just say if it's French immersion conversation, probably the French committee would have to be a part of it too. I think that's a whole different piece. And we do have a French committee that meets and talks about French programming.
Yeah, good point. Thank you, President Winkler, for reminding us about that other ad hoc committee's work. President Hutchins, go ahead.
We will certainly ensure that we have representation for whatever committee
Thank you.
takes up this work.
Appreciate that. Okay. So what I'm hearing then is that perhaps we don't need to lean into the working committee and creating another committee, but perhaps we would look to assign this work to the Equity Ad Hoc Committee. And then again, have them reporting back out through education policy and directions in December. And again, that would mean that Equity Ad Hoc Committee was looking at the proposing potential amendments to policy 110, policy 5147, looking at which data is tracked and which data should be tracked, with recommendations around potential policy or regulation changes. And also would be looking at proposing any terms of reference changes to their committees, ad hoc committees' terms of reference that they think is appropriate. What am I missing here in terms of directions that we could give the Equity Ad Hoc Committee? Maybe a qualifying statement just around, again, like what the reason we're doing this, like, you know, again, going back up to the first part of the motion to ensure that there are, I mean, can we just say like equitable educational opportunities and student experiences and supports across our district? Something more broad and high level, but at least providing some clarity about what it is we're trying to achieve. How do folks feel about that? Trustee Kwan, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I do like that. I like opportunities. I like student experiences as well as supports. I think really one of the big things, and maybe it's not key performance indicators, maybe it's outcomes, and that's a bit more general because of what data is collected and how that fits in. But I think outcomes, I think that's, regardless of whether we call it outcomes or key performance indicators, I think that that's a big thing that should be in any direction we give.
Okay. Okay, so now I'm gonna just reflect back what I'm hearing and everyone can tell me if I've got it right or not. With that, we're feeling comfortable about the idea of really assigning this work to the Equity Ad Hoc Committee to do rather than forming a working group, and then just making sure that it's clear kind of what the work product would be that we're seeking to come back by December 2nd to Ed Policy. And then further to that, looking to kind of weave into the motion some sort of qualifying statement about the intention, like why we're doing this, why we want them to work on these things. Okay, so if we are getting to that point, perhaps we want to then, subject to everyone else's views around this table, perhaps we do want to move out of committee of the whole soon, so that we can start to draft a motion. And then again, I'll pause once we've got something drafted so that we can hear from our partners around the table this evening before we would vote on that. The other alternative is that we could craft something collaboratively while we're in a committee of the whole and then move out of it to have someone move it. So, you know, if people would feel more comfortable doing that, given the complexities and all the moving parts, we can do it that way as well. Okay, so I think I'm listening some thumbs up that perhaps we can do some crafting in the committee of the whole together, and then when we're ready, we can move out and have someone move that. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to turn to my colleagues and to staff. Perhaps we can put something in the chat, start to kind of draft something up, which we can discuss in the committee of the whole. I think what I'm hearing is that it would be the usual preamble to the motion, that we'd be directing the Equity Ad Hoc Committee to be providing or doing this work on our behalf. So what are we going to say here, guys?
Chair Duncan, I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but as you were typing, I tried to capture it all and have a motion I can share to start us off.
Go for it. We're not going to be moving it. This is again just for discussion, so I don't see any reason why we have you participate that way. Go for it.
It's very rough, but believe that's what you were trying to articulate with perhaps the last qualifying sentence needing to be tweaked.
So, with respect to key performance indicators. Yeah, key performance indicators, perhaps we want to put something in there about that we want to look specifically at what data we're collecting and what data we need to collect. So that we can kind of pin down what are the key performance indicators in the context of this discussion and this work. So maybe we say key performance indicators. What was the language in the current motion? And maybe a focus on relevant data currently being tracked and what with recommendations regarding which data should be tracked. Something like that. And maybe want to say with recommendations, review and make recommendations to the board. Yeah, Trustee McNally, go ahead.
I don't have any idea how to just do this procedurally, but as we, narrow down the focus to what looks to me like the essential way to proceed, I don't want to lose track of that big motion that's so daunting to consider all at once. So I don't know how we can keep that as part of, well, as our a great reference point for the work going forward. I don't know how to do that because we haven't passed all things in motion, so we can't say we're the reference to motion, whatever. So I guess that's expressing my confusion and my desire that we not lose track of the really big motion.
Yeah, no, fair
Somebody
enough.
else figure it out.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I think we can unpack the kind of salient points from that larger motion and make sure that it's in here. Given that I think what we're hearing is that we're comfortable departing from the working committee and just focusing our efforts on assigning this work to the equity ad hoc committee. But yeah, I take your point that we wanna look to make sure we haven't lost sight of any of the important points from the motion in our agenda package. Okay, so we sort of retooled the front, so I would say that the Board of Education of School District number 61 Greater Victoria direct that prior to the end of November 2024, the Equity Ad Hoc Committee review and make recommendations to the Board of Education with respect to, and then we've got policy 110, policy 5147. And are we trying to cast the net more broadly to include other policies that they think need to be reviewed? Because I want to try to, again, like taking Trustee McNally's point, we want to try to boil this down to all the salient points, all the work that we want this ad hoc committee to do and make sure it's in the motion. Trustee Painter and then Trustee McNally.
Right. And it's maybe out of scope, but policies and initiatives, I'm mindful that we just went through an accessibility initiative. And to me, this is bordering at least on that. So it may not simply be our policies, but our other actions.
Yeah, so give them a little bit more scope to come back with other recommendations, not just focusing on those two policies. So we could say policy 110, policy 5147, and other policies or initiatives. And just again, open it up to some other possible recommendations. Trustee Painter, you had a follow up, and then I'm going to go to Trustee McNally.
I was gonna say, I think the language there at the start, applicable or relevant, and other applicable or relevant policies, initiatives.
So under other relevant policies or initiatives. Okay, Trustee McNally, go ahead.
I'm thinking of other related and affected policies. It's something I've certainly learned in making motions that I thought, hey, it's just this, and no, it had lots of different aspects in policy to consider. So yeah, other relevant and affected policies, maybe.
Other relevant
Suggestion.
policies or initiatives. Okay. Okay, so this is what I've got so far, folks. That the Board of Educational School Districts number 61 Greater Victoria direct that prior to the end of November 2024, the Equity Ad Hoc Committee review and make recommendations to the Board of Education with respect to Policy 110, Policy 5147, and other relevant policies or initiatives. Do we want to start getting into key performance indicators? Including, we're going to say data, recommendations about what data should be. I know what's the wording we've used elsewhere in the packet. Let's have a look. Should be tracked. Do we want to have something like that? Trustee Painter, what are your thoughts?
What data could inform?
Like that?
So a little broader to acknowledge, may not be doing it now.
So could inform, do we want to say like our work? Yeah, okay. So I'm gonna get rid of this. And then what about change of terms of reference? We would like the committee to come back with any recommendations regarding changes to their terms of reference. Would that be an end further part of the motion, or just another part of the list of things we want them to do? Any thoughts? Do you want me to review where we are? So we've got the usual preamble, direct that prior to the end of November 2024, the Equity Ad Hoc Committee review and make recommendations to the Board of Education with respect to Policy 110, Policy 5147, and other relevant policies or initiatives. Key performance indicators, including recommendations about what data could inform our work. And further, make recommendations regarding changes needed to the Equity Ad Hoc terms of reference. What are folks thinking? Yeah, Trustee McNally, go ahead.
Well, it sounds good, but I can't see it. Have you got it in there? Like,
I do almost. I thought I could help get this in and then send it. I'll send it on now if folks think we're at that point.
I just find it hard to hold it all if I can't see it visually.
Yeah,
That kind of person.
Fair enough. I hear you. Further make recommendations regarding.
Superintendent is waving
Yeah, go
over
ahead,
there.
Superintendent. I'm busy typing, but you go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if we could shift language away from key performance indicators to either learning outcomes or student learning outcomes. KPIs are typically used in education, and I want to make sure people are clear on what that is.
Yeah, okay. No, thanks for that. So you're suggesting that it's rather than key performance indicators, we use what terminology?
Outcomes or learning outcomes?
Is this maybe perhaps where we want to start to layer in some of those sort of qualifying, more value-based measures that we talked about earlier on in the motion in the pack up? So student learning outcomes. And do we want, yeah, so sorry, I see some hands. So President Hutchins and then Trustee Painter.
I think just going back to the VC Pact letter, it would be wonderful if data that was looked at was about educational opportunities, student experiences, and student supports or student outcomes. Outcomes is certainly a key part of it, but I think what we're hearing from so many parents is it's about opportunities and educational experiences, student experiences that are quite a different type of indicator than what might come through student outcomes. So that's the first thing I would add. And then the other thing that we referenced in the VC Pact letter as well is that I think there's a lot of qualitative data, stories from teachers, support staff, parents that would also be really wonderful to be heard. So not just key points of data, but hearing the qualitative stories behind the data, if at all possible.
Okay. So I'm just thinking how we might craft that into something in a motion, but let me go to Trustee McNally and then we'll turn our minds to that. Trustee McNally, go ahead.
Thank you. Coming from the point of view of students with IEPs, I mean, I know I'm speaking for people who should be speaking for themselves, but you know, IEPs have specific key outcomes, and over the years, I've seen, you know, many instances where if we had the proper support, the student, you know, education outcomes would have been different than they were at the end of their educational experience. So what I'm trying to say is that I have a feeling that key performance indicators needs to be in there somewhere. Yeah, I just thinking of it really focusing on students with IEPs. So I don't know, is everybody okay with having that in there somewhere, or do you want to just leave it out and go with other descriptors?
Why don't I'm sensing that folks really need a bit of an opportunity to read what we've got so far. So I'm gonna just send everybody what I've got so far. Okay, so just coming to everybody, let's have just a pause and a read through what we've got so far, and then we can go from there. And you can give me some more direction about what you think is missing. Trustee Painter, go ahead.
The one thing that I think we need to plug in here is the goal, and going back to the earlier one, to ensure that educational opportunities, et cetera, are both equitable and inclusive. Right now, we've got some tasks, but we don't have a reason for it.
Yeah, no, thanks for making sure we don't lose that. So what was your suggested wording? Do we want to say it right at the beginning with respect to how to ensure equitable and inclusive learning environments, or how do we want to put that? Trustee Kwan, you have an idea?
I wonder if we can do it after what we list, kind of what the things we want to examine. So student learning outcomes, student experiences, and student supports, including recommendations about qualitative and quantitative data. to ensure that each states that the educational opportunities, student experiences, and student supports, as well as learning outcome. Well, we have learning outcomes in there already. Yeah, I think we just need to drop back to say that these will not be substantially different as demonstrated, you know, among schools, including students, parents, teachers, and support staff.
So do we want to say, like, so you're suggesting that after we say about what qualitative and quantitative data could inform our work to ensure that, and then that kind of more value-based statement there?
Yeah, we could, although now that I think about it, we have the student experiences and all of that already in there already. So maybe it goes before that. So we say to ensure student learning or outcomes, student experiences, and student supports are equitable, include recommendations about what qualitative and quantitative data could inform our work, something like that. I don't know. Now I'm questioning my own suggestion.
To ensure that students, I mean, we're saying all of it to ensure what an equitable and inclusive opportunities for all students are equitable and inclusive. For all students are equitable. Trustee Painter, you've got a suggestion?
Yeah, I always get nervous about words like ensure,
Yeah.
but for the sake of discussion,
Mhm.
to ensure that student learning outcomes, student experiences are both equitable and inclusive, and remove the learning outcomes, the outcomes and experiences earlier on. And my rationale is that I see these as sort of the, for lack of a better word, the outcomes that we're trying to achieve.
Can you just put that, would you
Yeah.
mind copying and pasting and
sure.
then just adding that text in there and then just letting us see what you had in mind? And I realize, folks, that this is tedious work at times to try to craft this, but it'll make the formal part a lot easier. While Trustee Painter is working on just adding that kind of qualifying statement, just want to check in with our partners and get a sense of sort of whether you think this is going to provide sufficient clarity about what it is we're trying to achieve here around the equity ad hoc committee table in the coming months. Yeah, go ahead, President Howe.
Well, I can't actually see the motion either, so
Oh, goodness.
I'm gonna assume.
Oh, dear.
Wait, I take it back. My chat just came up.
Oh,
Okay,
good.
I just think that I think that I have enough information to direct our members exactly what the plan is, and yeah, I think we'll be ready to go.
Okay, no, that's good to know. Thank you. I think with this qualifying statement, we perhaps are ready to move out of committee of the whole too, subject to any final comments. And thanks for letting us know that you actually couldn't see our chat. I'm sorry about that. How's it going, Trustee Painter?
Right, I'll share now. It's still a bit of a dog's breakfast, but it's getting closer.
Okay, so we've got the Board of Education School District number 61 direct that prior to the end of November 2024, the Equity Ad Hoc Committee review and make recommendations to the Board of Education with respect to Policy 110, Policy 5147, and other relevant policies or initiatives. And student supports provide recommendations about what qualitative and quantitative data could inform our work with the objective of ensuring equitable and inclusive learning outcomes and experiences for all students, and further make recommendations regarding possible changes to the equity ad hoc terms of reference. Okay, I'm just gonna, can all of our partners as well as trustees see the chat now and see what's being proposed? Okay. Okay, I'm just gonna give you a minute just sort of to digest that. And then if we've gotten to the point where we're kind of happy with where we're going and we think it's sensible and takes into account all the kind of complexities that it can in a motion, gives clear direction, then perhaps we'll look for a motion to move us out of our committee of the whole. The only thing I would say, Trustee Painter, at this point is that the and student supports feels like it's sort of like on its own kind of without any kind of context. So maybe it's sort of like and provide recommendations about what qualitative and quantitative data could inform our work with the objective of ensuring equitable and inclusive learning outcomes, student supports, and experiences for all students, something like that. I just feel like it's sort of out there on its own, feeling
No,
kind of.
agreed. I was, and at that point, I wasn't sure if we were talking about student supports in terms of the tools to achieve the outcomes or as outcomes themselves. So that was where I was waffling. I would defer to the language you just offered. Apologies, I didn't write it down.
Okay, yeah, let me just see if I can quickly just amend what you've got here. Okay. I think we may be inclusive student supports, so should be really first. Learning outcomes and experiences for all students. Okay, so that's sort of what we would read. Again, it's in the chat, folks. Okay, so and then the only other thing obviously is, again, we don't provide a timeline. And so that was the only other piece from the other larger motion. Right now, it doesn't require us to report back anywhere. So perhaps as a final piece, we want to say and further report back, again, appreciating that really what we're looking for is a report back in December without any kind of judgment about what can be accomplished by then. Obviously, everyone will make their best efforts to come back with as fulsome a report as possible, but do we want to include a reporting back period at Ed Policy in December? Yeah? Okay. Okay, so let's see here. So what was the wording we want to, and report back to education policy and directions. Okay, we're almost there, folks. Thank you so much for your patience and your contributions. Okay, so it would be and further. Do we want to say just report back? Or provide a report to? Yeah, Trustee Quinn, go ahead.
We could add it at the end with another and further, report back on, progress or status at the, what did we say, ed policy? I'm gonna
Yeah.
just call it.
Yeah.
Yeah, at ed policy, December 2nd.
Yeah.
Oh, superintendent, sorry.
Yeah, superintendent, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm just concerned that in the motion above, it says direct that prior to the end of November 2024. So then we're suggesting that by December, there's a progress report, but it's already been determined that November, all
Yeah,
of that
you're right.
has to be done.
Yeah, no, you're right. And so I'm sorry about that. Thanks for flagging that, superintendent. Yeah, do we want to say by the end of December? So prior to the end of December? Thanks for catching that. No? Okay, trustee Kwan, go ahead.
Well, I think we're all on vacation by the end of December, so I would say I think we need to be specific about where it's being reported to.
Yeah.
Rather than just prior to the end of November, where's it gonna go? So I think we need to direct where it's gonna go and what date.
Okay. Okay, so direct it prior to the end of November 24, the Equity Ad Hoc Committee review and make, so we have to give a realistic timeline. So go ahead, trustee Kwan, what are you suggesting?
Yeah, I'm actually suggesting just take out prior to the end of November. I think we just say, we take out the prior to the end of November. We just keep it direct the Equity Ad Hoc Committee, and then at the end, we go and further report on progress at the ed policy meeting, December 2nd, 2024.
Okay. Okay, so we're gonna get rid of that. Direct the equity, yeah, okay, and then we're gonna say, and further. And it's report back to the education policy and yeah, okay. And report back to the education policy and directions standing committee on, it was the 2nd of December 2024. Okay. Okay, there we go. Is this the penultimate, the final? Let's see. Give you a minute to have a look, and then if we're happy, I'll be looking to a mover subject to our partners' comments to move us out of committee of the whole so we can get this on the floor. So it's at the Board of Education of School District number 61, Greater Victoria, direct the Equity Ad Hoc Committee. Oh, okay, it's to review. We're always finding something, aren't we? To review and make recommendations to the Board of Education with respect to Policy 110, Policy 5147, and other relevant policies or initiatives, and provide recommendations about what qualitative and quantitative data could inform our work with the objective of ensuring equitable and inclusive student supports, learning outcomes, and experiences for all students, and further make recommendations regarding possible changes to the equity ad hoc terms of reference, and further report back to the education policy and directions standing committee on 2nd of December 2024. Okay, so yeah, trustee Painter, go ahead.
I haven't reviewed Robert's rules, but could we get rid of the first and further? It just it's stirring for me.
Okay. Yeah, 1 second. Just going to add in that to review piece, and you're suggesting we get rid of the and further and just add it to the list, to first and further. So just be semicolon, make recommendations regarding possible changes. Okay. Gotcha. So I think that's it. Here we go. How are we feeling? Are we ready to move out of committee of the whole and do this officially? President Hutchins, go ahead.
Forgive me, this is one of my first full school district board meetings that I've watched. It's an observation, and it may be a moot point, just not knowing your internal processes, but just noticing the difference between the potential motion as drafted on the screen and the draft motion that's in the agenda. The motion on the screen directs the Equity Ad Hoc Committee to do a series of work, but the motion on the screen or in the agenda package directs the superintendent to do a series of work. And it's more just of a question on resourcing, and supports available to the ad hoc committee from staff, and just noticing that difference. And I don't know if that's neither here nor there, but it's more of intrinsic.
Yeah, yeah, like, so I think I can field that subject to anything else the superintendent wants to add, but, so the board can direct any of our ad hoc committees to do certain things, so that's not really an issue. In terms of the resourcing for the committee, the support of the committee, there's a member of the senior leadership team that's assigned to support the work of each of our ad hoc committees. In this case, Associate Superintendent Arts is the senior leadership team member that's assigned to support that work. In terms of the motion and the pack up, it hasn't been moved. And so the fact that trustees and we've done some collaborative work to come up with what we think would be a better approach. It'll just need to be, once we move out of committee of the whole, it would need to be moved, seconded, debated, and then voted on. And if we just, the motion and the pack up just doesn't get moved. So that's sort of how it would work from a procedural perspective. Superintendent, did you though have anything further that you could add in response to President Hutchins' questions and observations?
I think the only thing that I could add is likely, given the breadth and depth of this work with the Equity Ad Hoc Committee, it would be likely that more than one senior leadership team member would be attending these meetings. So we're worried about capacity. I think it's probably likely that 2 or 3 of us would be there.
Okay, thanks, Superintendent. Yeah, and I know that we've also got a lot of expertise like in our pool of district principals and other professionals. Obviously, the reps around the table from our partners provide their expertise as well. So I think there'd be kind of ample expertise, it sounds like, hopefully around the table. But if there was any concerns, we could certainly raise those with the superintendent and get some advice. Trustee McNally, go ahead.
Thank you. Just referring back to the original motion, if the way we're going to treat it is just not move it, can there be some, I've kind of lost my grip on Robert's rules too. I'll have to read the book. That can there be some, you know how it always says trustees asked questions of clarification. Could it be recorded in some way that although this motion was not moved, trustees discussed it in depth and you know, referred it for further work to a working committee, just something like that, so that, you know, when people read it and see, well, nothing happened to it, that's pretty disrespectful. So we can make some kind of note, I think it would be a good idea.
Thanks, Trustee McNally. And just to be clear, I think subject to the board's direction, we are going to move a motion to direct the work, but in a different way. And the board can do whatever it likes with its minutes. So however we want to note what we've done this evening, we can just make sure that we bring those suggestions when we're looking at our minutes of this evening's special board meeting. That would be my suggestion. Again, subject to any advice our staff might have for us. Okay. Okay, so I'm really looking now to my board colleagues. Are you ready to move out of committee of the whole? And okay, and have I missed any of our partners that wish to speak to this? Because again, we're going to have an opportunity for the partners to speak. You have 2 minutes to speak to motions. So I will provide that opportunity once we're out and we've got this on the floor and we're moving it forward. Okay, so I'm looking then for a mover from my colleagues. Yeah, Trustee Kwan moving us out of committee of the whole, and seconder. Thank you, Trustee McNally. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of moving out of committee of the whole, and that is unanimous. Okay. Okay, so trustees, we're out of committee of the whole. We've got some work that we've done. Does somebody want to take that work and move it? Trustee Kwan, go ahead. Seconded by, does anybody want to second it? Trustee Mabobi, thank you. Okay, so just so for clarity, Trustee Kwan, did you want to read into the record what it is you're moving? And then I'm going to open the floor for discussion from our partners first.
Absolutely, I can. So that the Board of Education of School District number 61, Greater Victoria, direct the Equity Ad Hoc Committee to review and make recommendations to the Board of Education with respect to Policy 110, Policy 5147, and other relevant policies or initiatives, and provide recommendations about what qualitative and quantitative data could inform our work, with the objective of ensuring equitable and inclusive student supports, learning outcomes, and experiences for all students. Make recommendations regarding possible changes to the equity ad hoc terms of reference, and further, report back to the report back to the Education Policy and Directions Standing Committee on December 2nd, 2020.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to open the floor first to our partners. Feel free if there is something that you wanted to speak to, otherwise I will turn to trustees. Yeah, President Hutchins, go ahead.
First, just want to say to Chair, through you, Chair Duncan, and to the board, I think the motion tonight certainly creates the space to begin to have really meaningful conversations about equity and inclusion, and to collect information that can better support school district policies. And I think it's really in line with the spirit of what was in the original VCPAC letter that was drafted. So thank you very much for the opportunity to participate tonight, and I think VCPAC would certainly support the motion as drafted. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, President Hutchins. We appreciate it. Appreciate all of our partners, your willingness to engage in a slightly different way than maybe you're used to, so thank you so much. Trustees, I'm not seeing any other partners wanting to speak to the motion on the floor, so again, I'll turn to my colleagues if anyone would like to speak to it before I call the question. Okay, all those in favor with a show of hands. And that is unanimous. All right, thank you again, everybody. I just want to check in with staff, especially the Secretary Treasurer, if you're minuting our meeting this evening. Are you good with the motion in the chat? You've got that? Okay, wonderful. Okay, so I'm going to move us on in our pack up this evening. We have under B, another piece of new business. That the Board of Education of School District number 61 Greater Victoria, yep, that's it. Direct the chair to submit formal requests for information under the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act to police departments and police boards serving the SD61 school community that have not yet responded to requests for the following information. A, any and all data pertaining to gang recruitment or other criminal activity involving youth between 2015 to date. Any and all data pertaining to police callouts to each SD61 school broken down by each school within each police department's jurisdiction between 2015 to date. And C, a copy of any and all police policies and procedures related to vulnerable populations, including youth. Okay, so again, I'm looking to my colleagues. If there is anyone that wishes to move that, just to clarify to perhaps as well what it is you want me to do, since you're directing me. So Trustee Painter, go ahead.
Yes, thanks. I'll claim this motion, and if I have a second, I'll motivate.
Thank you, Trustee McNally, seconded by Trustee McNally.
Essentially, this is the same motion that was initiated in May, and we finally received responses from Saanich and West Shore RCMP. Still 2 police departments / boards outstanding in their information requests, but the language is the same. The one change I would like to propose, so whether this needs to be a formal assessment or not, is to change the word data to records. Based on the information that we've received so far from Saanich and RCMP, data appears to be being defined very narrowly, and I don't know that that's specific, or that's exactly what we're looking for. I believe records in an FOI term is broad enough that it would include other forms of information held by those offices. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Painter. All right, folks. Trustee McNally, did you want to add anything as a seconder? And if not, then I'll move to Trustee Kwan. Thank you. Go ahead, Trustee Kwan.
Thanks. I just wondered, with regards to this motion, perhaps we need to clarify where we're gonna send those FOI requests. I'm assuming we wouldn't need to do it to the police boards that have already supplied the information. Having said that, I know one of those was just a partial reply. We didn't get any policies along with the request. So wondered if we wanted to change it in any way with regards to that information.
Thank you, Trustee Kwan. And so just to clarify, this would be, I've already made a formal request in May to Victoria and Esquimalt Police. And so that is outstanding. I could certainly make another request sort of clarifying that we are in fact making the request under FIPA. And then the other outstanding reply is from Oak Bay Police. And then the partial reply is from RCMP, as Trustee Kwan mentioned, the policies and procedures were not provided. So I could do those as like, you know, again, formal FOI requests, making it clear that it's a request under the Act. But yeah, just again, just looking for some clarity about what the direction is. I'm not sure about whether it's, you know, useful at this point to amend the request, or if what we want to do is try to get similar data from police services, and then through our ongoing dialogues, then through discussion with them, fine tune and ask for additional information at that point. But again, looking for some direction from my colleagues. Yeah, Trustee Painter, go ahead.
Yeah, I wrote it in such a way that recognizing that information may have arrived in the time between when I submitted it, when we had a chance to consider it, that the situation might change. My intention was that any department that has not yet fully provided a response, that we should do it. And my intention of making it a formal request is so that we can call upon the Office of the Information Privacy Commissioner for assistance, or any other formal measures that we need to do to move this along. We have tried to be collaborative since spring, and we're still sitting here with insufficient information. With respect to records versus data, my recommendation would be, given the amount of time that has passed so far without a response, that we may be further along to cast our net as broadly as possible, knowing that the back and forth may take an extremely long time if we need to then clarify with additional requests down the road, and we are on the clock. So I think best to be as broad as possible, and then scope in based on the information we receive.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Painter. So are you moving an amendment then to the motion to change the words data in A and B to records?
Yes, I am, Chair.
Okay, and you looking to see if Trustee Painter has a seconder for that amendment? Trustee Kwan, thank you. Okay, so we've got an amendment, again, just to clarify, it's to change the words data in A and B to the word records. Any discussion? I guess, again, I don't want to exclude our partners. If you do have something you want to add, feel free before I ask trustees to engage in a discussion. Okay, so trustees, any discussion in relation to the proposed amendment before I call the question? Okay, all those in favor with a show of hands? And that is unanimous. Okay, so we've got an amended motion. Again, any discussion before I call the question on the motion as amended? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor, the amended motion with a show of hands, and that is unanimous. Okay, thank you very much, trustees, and everyone else for your patience. We're now at G2. Do we have any notice of motions? Okay, now that brings us to our last item on the agenda, which is a motion to adjourn. Trustees, may I have a mover to adjourn? Thank you, trustee McNally, seconded by trustee Mabobi. All those in favor with a show of hands? That's unanimous. Thank you again, folks. Take good care. See you soon. Good night.